Today on the Cameron Journal podcast, we're returning with episode 4 of the Happiness series. And to before we do the recap, I want to remind everyone that we're doing all of these episodes, me and Joe, in support of our summit, our virtual summit in July 17th and 18th, called What is Truth? Um, Refining your discernment in an age of misinformation. I always have trouble remembering that phrase. We should have made it easier to say, but it sounds good when I can remember to say it. And it's July 17th and 18th. For more information, head over to summit.suitmedia.net, link in the description, to join us and other truth seekers. We have a great lineup of speakers. I was just looking at it last night. We have a lady who's going to bring you into your body. Eileen's going to talk about prophecy. I'm talking about my own journey in politics and what it's been like being a journalist in the age of Trump a little bit. And Joe's going to be talking to us about Verity and philosophical war stuff. It's going to be a full weekend with 3 great keynotes, wonderful sessions. So summit.suitmedia.net. And if you are a longtime Joe Atman friend or a longtime Cameron Journal listener, this is a ticketed event. Journal admissions is $25. If you really want to go and the 25 is hard to swing, I get it and I got you. Joe and I have tickets to give away. So if you love the summit, you checked it out, and you just can't swing the ticket, honor system, drop a comment on this video or drop a comment on a blog post or email me, email@cameroncowan.net. Get a hold of me, not hard to find. I got you. I got you. But for now, let's turn our attention to our latest installment of Happiness, and we're going to recap real quick. So, what have we found out from Joe's big philosophy brain? We found out happiness is not an emotion, it's a state of being. Then we kind of got into, is happiness worth pursuing? Is that necessarily goal? Maybe not really. And then yesterday we discovered that the formula for happiness is to engage with reality or verity in the Atman parlance, um, on its own terms without any expectation or putting anything more on it than what it is. And in today's episode, on episode 4, we're going to go in a kind of a completely different direction, more towards my wheelhouse. Last episode was Joe's wheelhouse. This time we're going to go into more of my wheelhouse, and we're going to look at happiness as a society. And we're going to look at Bhutan's GHP, Global Happiness Index, and then we're going to look at the World Happiness Index. We're going to look at happiness in terms of material conditions, in terms of politics, and what governments can, and in some cases are not, especially if you live in America, are not doing in terms of improving our national happiness. So, yeah, Joe, are you ready to talk about happiness as a policy construct?
Can't wait. Let's go.
All
Happy
right.
to do it.
Yeah, so I want to jump right in because and I it is I want to kind of get into like happiness, like how have we defined happiness so far? And then I'm going to contrast that with what they're doing in Bhutan. Because in America, we've defined happiness as a car in the driveway, a chicken in every pot, white picket fence, a wife, husband, especially if you want to live in a red state, and 2.5 children. And that has been that sort of consumerist metric has been our definition of happiness since World War II. And that has been, the American dream, the highest standard of living in the world, all this sort of thing. We've put all that, we've made it material, we've made it consumerist, we've made it if you own the right stuff, you have the right spouse, you live in the right neighborhood, that's the American dream, that's happiness. Happiness is in the Constitution. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Note, not the achievement of happiness, the pursuit of happiness, which is very different in contrast to what the French did with fraternity, liberty, and equality. Um, Very different of the two Enlightenment republics. We brought two very different ideas of what a good life was. In America, it was life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In France, it was fraternity, brotherhood, closeness in society, liberty, and equality, which very different moods and ideas. The French didn't need to be happy. They just didn't want to have a crappy society. And anytime something goes wrong in France, they burn the country down. That's how they solve problems over there. Um, and so I think, maybe first impressions is um how, given all that we've learned in the first three episodes and now we're on episode four, how do you feel like the American conception of happiness and the sort of consumerist materialist idea of happiness, how does that contrast with your own thoughts on happiness? And then we'll go to Bhutan.
Well, it has everything to do with kind of what we've already stated, right? That happiness isn't, or I mean, true happiness can't be tied to an external circumstance. If you're anchoring yourself to the wave, you're gonna get bounded about by those waves every time one comes in. You anchor yourself to the floor, to the ocean floor. So you have to find your floor. You have to find whatever it is that literally anchors your soul. And again, if I think a lot of this has to do with actually being at peace with yourself, with the world, with again, and it really ultimately actually comes down to how you construct and set up your own consciousness, how you construct your own ideas, the way in which you perceive and then reflect back into the world. So all this has to do again with your own state, and yet as you, I mean, in true happiness has to do with your own state of being, and like we said, it's a state. It's not. True happiness is a more a way of being rather than an emotion per se. Or at least I think that's the goal. I mean, certainly, if we're pursuing happiness. Now, we've also said, or I've also said, that I don't think happiness should be the goal. That I think finding what actually is, I think finding reality should be the goal. And then a natural byproduct, once we understand what actually is, once we're actually with that reality itself, happiness is a natural occurrence thereof. That all said, what you're talking about is what's been sold to us as that pursuit of happiness. And at least in my, I don't think the framers of the Constitution had it necessarily in this way, thought of it like this, but how we're talking about, or how it may be the modern construct of it is has to do very much with some sort of material capacity that's tied very frequently to a monetary status that we have, which I think there's something interesting to be said about money. Is I don't think that people actually are in pursuit of money. I think that they're actually in pursuit because what is money actually? Money is actually a utility and it's a means. And what it provides is safety, which is something that we've also talked about, is that in this series, is that safety is actually a natural default attempt, an attempt to actually get to a safe place or safety in general, is something that we try and do all the time as human beings. So money actually provides a very secure, or at least it allows us power and control over a lot of other manipulatives that would otherwise sway a lot of clout on us or impress its weight on us. um, for those who don't have giant monetary means. So I really think that the pursuit of money actually has a lot more to do with safety, security, well-being, and one's capacity to have some power in an otherwise powerless or generally feeling of this powerlessness that we all have as human beings because we're just subjective individuals in this giant kind of theater of otherness and this other world that we're battling against. So again, I think that the framing of the pursuit of happiness very different originally when those words were written, probably to what we've currently interpreted it as. And I think that we Gosh, I think so. People are so busy in the modern era. I'm not sure that I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I don't have a beat on, exactly what the truly younger generation, and I'm not even talking about Gen Z. What's after Gen Z?
Gen
Uh,
Alpha.
Gen Alpha. So I don't know what their world is going to look like. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what their perspective is on all of this. I mean, I think people's motivations are often also unknown to them frequently. But my sense is that with technology, and it's not just technology, it's the newness of technology uh, that we're all currently grappling with, that happiness is almost like a secondary thought, and maybe it always was. Although I get the feeling that maybe people in a simpler life at a simpler time, maybe happiness was a more naturally occurring phenomena than it is now. I just don't even know, like, what are people pursuing now? I don't know. I asked that genuinely. I'm not sure. So.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, let's unpack all of that for a minute. I think I think there's a bit of when it comes to the material conditions contributing to happiness, I think, well, there's obviously a lot of propaganda because so much of modern branding and marketing is aspirational. If there's one thing that's changing about late Gen Z and early Gen Alpha is they're not feeling aspirational, and aspirational marketing tends not to work on them. I was reading an article in Adweek about this that
When you say
major
aspirational, really quickly, Cameron, sorry. When you say aspirational, like they don't have like the traditional like aspirations, wills, desires that like previous generations did, in the form of what exactly?
Well, so aspirational in terms of product marketing is all about what you have isn't that great. You could do a lot
Okay.
better. And you see this a lot in the luxury product space. You
Gotcha.
can get a purse at Target, but Louis Vuitton is better.
Okay.
And
Gotcha.
so a lot of the times when you're a product with a higher price point or a luxury product, a lot of the marketing is about like, yeah, upgrade, move up to. You see this even in car ads, sort of thing. You
Sure.
know, get something bigger, get something faster, get something nicer, get these new features that you need. The younger generations, the aspirational marketing does not really work on them. They don't feel a need to advance beyond wherever it is that they are, which I think is funny. I think part of that is tech has made the world so flat. I mean, we in the 2010s we had the tech bro who was worth 100 million but dressed in a hoodie that cost $70, and that was the most expensive thing he was wearing. Most of the tech bros, if they had $200 of clothes on their back, that was whoo hoo hoo hoo, really crazy. Their shoes might have been the most expensive thing. And that has really pulled out compared to the generation before that would have brought a Brooks Brothers suit and driven a
Okay.
Cadillac. The tech bros are kind of like, yeah, I'll take a nice hoodie and take an Uber.
Yeah.
Sort of, very different way. They don't express their wealth in the same way, and that was we're talking the difference between boomers and millennials. A lot of boomers, it was, yeah, I'm gonna buy a bigger house, I'm gonna get a better car, more than one car, all the toys, all this type of thing. He who has the most toys wins, sort of thing. Millennials kind of rejected that, and then economic circumstance really made them reject it. See my book America's Lost Generation about that. And but even the millennials who are incredibly wealthy, like your Mark Zuckerberg, for example, um, you know, Mark bought an island in Hawaii. Most boomers wouldn't have bothered. They would have bought a condo at most. You know, um, but with Gen Z and Alpha, their interest in even this is true globally. Their interest in luxury brands is basically non-existent. Which, if you're the chief global marketing officer at Gucci Group, which owns 17 fashion brands, that's not what you want to hear. Because your next generation of you've got millennials for another couple decades, but your next generation of consumers that you need to train and get brand awareness of now, even before they can afford some of the stuff, is not interested in a luxury good for the sake of a brand or a label or what it says about them, they have almost no interest. Um,
And
that's
why is that though?
they no one really knows why. I have some theories. Um, if you're a late Gen Z or a Gen Alpha, you've grown up between about 2007 and the present day. What's been going on since 2007 in the present day? It's been financial collapse, it's been social media, it's been digital spaces, it was the pandemic, which if you're a late Gen Z or a Gen Alpha, you were in school for, and you went from a classroom to Zoom, to school, all this type of thing. You know about that working in education. All this sort of thing. I think for them the stakes of society have been a lot higher. They're focused on what is high quality, and I think also their lives happen on Roblox. That's where they're hanging out with their friends. That's where they're showing stuff off. They don't need a Louis Vuitton bag. They need more Roblox cash. I say, as
Right.
my nephew
That
of
makes
my heart asked me for a gift card for Christmas last year. Oh, just give me a Steam gift card for Roblox. Okay, you're 12. That's fine. Um, I think I think digital spaces have made the marginal utility, which is an economic term, of how useful something is, the marginal utility of luxury goods has gone down because they don't matter in a digital space.
I was going to say, I imagine that every answer for these kinds of questions, like why is that with it? All of it has to do with the digital space, right? And because it used to be also that you could that like right, glamour was like one of there's like I forget what it is, but there's a couple of different ways to market. I mean, they're very broad strokes, right?
Right.
Um, in glamour it was one of the major pillars of it, right?
Yes.
This, yeah, you right, own this car and it's glamorous. You have this perfume and it's glam.
Yeah.
Where I mean the target marketing now, it's very specific, and it's not just monopolized, or not one company has like the capacity to run the TV ads, or the which are very expensive, or the radio ads.
Right. Yeah.
Now you get the Google ads for $50, and you target a very specific audience. So I imagine that probably has something to do with it also, but I didn't know about any of that.
No,
So
no, I mean there's that aspect to it. I think there's also I mean, and you're slightly older than I, but even in our own lifetimes, let's just sit back and review. I'm 38 years old. Joe's in the mid 40s. I mean, in our lives, we've lived through 9/11. Sort of thing. My Gen Z companions would want me to remind us the Challenger disaster in '86. That was also the same year Chernobyl blew up. People forget those things are coterminous. And then you've got the '93 World Trade Center bombing, 9/11 in 2001. Iraq invasion, Afghanistan invasion, 20 years of global war on terrorism. I have friends with PTSD and issues to this day. All of these things have happened, and you throw the pandemic in there, the 2008 collapse, and a lot of people, especially your Gen Zers, there were the families that were out on the road because their house got foreclosed on, all this type of thing. I think they never like us growing up in the 90s, we had the stability to want to own a Polo by Ralph Lauren sweatshirt or hoodie. We had the stability to actually care. Oh
sure,
yeah, let me
sure.
head on down to let me name some brands for you: Abercrombie and Fitch, Hollister, American Eagle. Let's just go through the a 2004 shopping mall. Um, we had the economic and emotional stability to want those things, to care about those things, to aspire to be the super hot dude on the side of the bag. I'm sure Joe achieved that. I did not. We wanted to. The aspiration was the point. And I think the kids now they haven't look at their lives. I mean, the world's been utter chaos. Who gives a crap what purse you're carrying when you got stuck in your house for 2 years? Who
Mhm.
cares what clothes you're wearing when going outside isn't your most important social interaction? It's on Discord, it's on Roblox, and it's in all these other communities. And luxury brands aren't in those spaces, and that's not the currency of those spaces anyway, sort of thing. And so I think, ironically, I think all of this has somewhat led to a bit of depression. And so I want to hook back into the material aspect of happiness because hitherto happiness and material circumstances have been inextricably linked, I think. Now, part of that is through, do you have shelter, food, water, access to health care? Are the chances of your children surviving good? All those types of things. And most of industrial modernity for the last 200 years has been tasked with solving that problem. Women die less in childbirth now. More children survive to adulthood. One of the reasons birth rates are low. The chances of you falling dead in your mid 50s from a heart attack are very small. Heart attacks are eminently survivable. A generation ago, people died at 54 of a heart attack. Nowadays, we send you to the hospital, we put a stent in, put you on some medication, and send you home, sort of thing. Smallpox eliminated, vaccines arrived, all this type of thing has massively improved for, especially if you live in a developed country, massively improved the standard and quality of living. And even on the marketing side, just how we got into the whole brands and Gen Z and Gen Alpha thing, even brands were always marketing as, why do you want to buy the fast car? Will make you happy. Ultimately, it will make you happier. You aspire to a better thing because it will give you more happiness. You'll feel better about yourself. You'll feel more confident. When I used to teach advertising, it's like, yeah, there's a reason why they have a hot girl standing next to the car. The implication is clear. Buy this car and she might look at you. Now, in my case, that's never going to happen, but I'll buy the car anyway. But it's that's the implication. That's why sex sells. Now, interestingly enough, that's also something Gen Z doesn't. It doesn't work on them either. Not only are they not having sex, but sex does not sell for them. And Gen Alpha will be just as bad, if not worse. But however, don't stop making sexy ads. It still works on millennials. And Gen X, sort of thing. And and so these are the basic implications. If anything, advertising is probably going to go backwards to a pre-Edward Bernays idea. But I think this idea that material circumstances and happiness should not be linked, I think they are to a point in terms of material conditions will improve your happiness to a point. And then once that point is reached, I think that's when what you're talking about kicks in. You have to have that anchor within yourself because after a certain point, a new bag, a new car, or a new boat is not going to cause you any more happiness. It's something from within. And that you can spend a lot of money and a lot of stress and put your health in a bad way chasing more money to get more happiness, but after a certain point it's just not going to happen, you know. And it, I always when I was working with this to prove this point, I was working with this sommelier at one point, and he was telling me about he'd gone to this very expensive wine tasting because to be a sommelier, you have to work with every type of alcohol and know everything about it to be a master sommelier. So
Sure.
he'd gone to this course in France to study wine, just wine, just wine. And he asked one of his teachers what was the best bottle of wine he'd ever had. And he said, whatever one I'm drinking with my friends and family.
There you go.
And he said, this man, this teacher spends his life drinking the best wines France can produce. I mean, just abs stuff that sells for thousands of dollars a bottle, very limited runs. I mean, really great stuff. And he said, whatever I'm drinking with my family and friends. The meaning of the social moment is
Hmm.
greater than the grapes in the bottle. It's fermented grapes in a bottle. That's what wine is. But for him, the social context of where that's consumed was far more important to his happiness, we'll call it, than the price tag on the bottle or how great the vineyard was, how wonderful and accomplished the winemaker was, or how many awards that winery had won, sort of thing. And I think that's kind of where, again, materialism is only going to take you so far. You know, a $400 bottle of wine might be really great to drink, but I would much, much rather schlep out to California and have it with Joe in his house that's in the middle of nowhere. That's of greater value to me than just sitting here in Connecticut drinking a $400 bottle of wine, sort of thing. And I think that also kind of ends up kind of looping back into Bhutan because their gross national happiness, which was coined by Bhutan's fourth king, which I'm not going to pronounce his name, but it ends in Wangchuk, which sounds really cool, in the 1970s, asserted that gross national happiness is more important than gross domestic product. The GNH, this is from the OECD website, the GNH is intended to provide a comprehensive approach toward measuring progress, prioritizing overall well being, and happiness over purely economic pursuits. Since its inception, the idea of GNH has not only shaped Bhutan's development policy, but has also resonated globally. By introducing the Gross National Happiness Index, Bhutan created a practical measurement tool for policymaking. The GNH Index serves as an incentive for the government, NGOs, and businesses in Bhutan to enhance societal well-being and happiness. It provides a holistic reflection of the overall well-being of the Bhutanese population, moving beyond a mere subjective psychological ranking of happiness. Developed through an extensive participatory approach, the GNH Index framework comprises 9 integral domains encompassing psychological well being, health, balanced time use, education, cultural diversity and resilience, good governance, community vitality, ecological diversity and resilience, and living standards. These domains are measured using 33 GNH conditions represented as indicators. These indicators and domains affect core causes and conditions of well being and human flourishing. You can buy a lot of those things with money, but a lot of them you can't. And I think that's what's most interesting about the GNH in Bhutan is, yeah, some of those do cost money, the healthcare, the housing, all that sort of thing. But the societal well-being, how well people are getting along, you can't throw money at that problem. Not really. You can put up some campaigns until people get along, but to create the conditions in which people are feeling good and positive, they're integrating more socially, all this type of thing, rather than just being like, oh my God, our gross domestic product is down. We need more factories and more jobs that people are working 16 hours a day. They're not seeing their families. They're miserable, and so yes, your GDP has gone up, but you're miserable. Um, and this idea of Bhutan being like, let's have development, let's have all that stuff, but let's put it in a framework that prioritizes our societal well-being, that prioritizes our psychological well-being. And there's even some great ones in here. The ecological diversity, community vitality, cultural diversity, balanced time use. I mean, can you imagine going to Congress and being like, we'd like to make a national law that we need to have a balanced time use for Americans? That's dead on arrival. Like, no one would take you seriously, sort of thing. But in Bhutan, they're doing their development in a framework that includes the principles of good living, as defined by them in their culture. Of course, you might define them differently here in the United States, but the Bhutanese view of good living, and that they want their development to fit within that framework, so that you do get all the stuff, but you get people that are happier too. And I think I've always felt like it's so revolutionary to say, let's develop, but let's make sure we still feel good about it, rather than just throwing all of our country to make more money, but we're no happier for having done it.
Yeah. Uh, Again, a lot of the things that it sounds like Bhutan is setting up are absolutely conditions, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of those conditions, I would also argue are conditions that give people a huge degree of comfort and safety. Uh,
Yeah.
and once you have that, if you've got comfort, you've got safety, you've got some, even if you don't have comfort and safety per se, if you have some control over your own life, I think there's something to be said about that also. Where I think a lot of people
Mm.
feel like, they're constantly at the will and whim of something or someone else. Um, and again, all of that is going to degenerate into this feeling of, or if you don't feel comfortable, if you don't feel safe, if you don't feel in control, that degenerates into this obviously feeling of insecurity and ultimately anxiety and unhappiness and all those things that come with it. So I think what we're talking about with the Bhutan parameter there, those things that Bhutan has set up is setting conditions and wide parameters and having a goal to give that to their population. I would still argue that happiness is still up to the individual. And you can have, and I mean, it's not like things from the exterior world, just to clarify again, can't make you happy. They totally can. Obviously, just like we were talking about in the last episode, where a wave comes and hits your boat. Someone close to you is hurt or injured or passes away or whatever. Something happens to you personally in any regard. You can feel sad. I mean, it's not like. I mean, what kind of psychopath would you be if you didn't feel any of those? If you didn't feel that's what it is to be a human being, right? I mean, you have to go through all of that stuff in order to get the full human experience. Otherwise, what are we doing here? Now it might be easier to do all this while you're, in a state of bliss, of course. But again, what if you were just happy all the time? Like as a human being, like that's not really the point of it. I don't, I think you learn probably less if you're in one constant state. But you could say that also for those who are not happy all the time, is that you're just not going to let if you're well. But I mean, if and I think you're happier than you think. But if you are always from this default perspective, you're again kind of goes back to what I've been saying throughout this series. Then you're seeing things through one lens, through one bias, through one angle and perspective, and you're not letting the reality of whatever it is that you're interacting with and or observing actually come and penetrate you fully because you've got a perspective, you've got a prerogative. The challenge to us all is to try and strip those things away as best we can to observe fully, actually, and authentically. Um, but again, that doesn't mean that you can't that you have to be numb to everything. Quite the opposite is that you should feel all of this stuff, and understand the feelings and understand yourself within the feelings, and then understand that regardless of what it is that you're currently going through, things continue and continue to unfold, and you continue along with them. So again, when we're talking about what happened with or what Bhutan's priorities are, largely I think that and I think it's a great goal. I mean, I think that's awesome. But they're because a government can't make you happy. A government can just set up conditions for which to provide safety and security for you.
Indeed.
Um, yeah,
Life,
but
liberty,
there's
and the
something to
pursuit
that,
of
right?
happiness. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, there's something to that. I
yeah.
bet, right? Because again, when they're setting up conditions, it's still up to you, obviously. But you can set up a condition that gives you everything. You can plan the party and throw it. But there's a really funny Adam Sandler skit on Saturday Night Live when he like went back and hosted one time a number of years ago, where he's like, he's playing like a tour guide. He's like, we can take you on a boat. We can't make you like
Yeah,
boating, right? And
yes.
we like,
Yeah, he
like,
was he was spoofing the old Perillo Tours ads from
okay,
way back in the 80s
okay,
and 90s. There was this Italian family named Perillo, and they would go on and sell these tours to Italy. And there
okay.
was the old grandpa. He eventually died, and the son took over and everything. He was spoofing that. Yeah, it's like
I never
you
saw
gonna
that.
be You
Yeah.
gonna be the same sad
You're gonna see
you
her, yeah,
as
right.
you are in
Exactly. Exactly. That's, and it was great,
Yeah,
right? But it
yeah,
perfectly, in a tongue-in-cheek way illustrates what we're talking about here. You can set up all
yeah.
those things, but ultimately it's still up to you.
Yeah, and which gets into the whole thing of, whatever you have going on is going to be the same thing wherever you are. So like just because you're feeling bad doesn't mean you need to move to a new city or to a new place. Because the problems that you have in Chicago, you're going to have in LA. The problems you have in LA, you're going to have in New York. All this type of thing. You can move all around the country and the world, but if the underlying is still unresolved, all you're going to do is be sad and depressed with a new address and a lot of moving costs.
There you go.
Um,
So that's why I
sort
think
of
everything
thing.
we've been talking about up to this point is so like you have to take all that stuff in. It's so pertinent to the conversation. And again, like it's great to have conditions that allow for all of that. That's amazing. And I bet, and I imagine that index, right? I mean, that people are happier in Bhutan. I'm sure because they're probably safer. They probably feel like they're more in control of their lives, and because right, the government and all these things have been set up so that the conditions are right for them to go and live and truly and actually authentically pursue happiness.
Well, it's funny you should mention that because I have the World Happiness Report here.
Okay.
And so every year the World Happiness Reports ranks people based upon how happy they are, sort of thing. And you'd be surprised to find out that Bhutan only ranks 79,
Yeah.
actually.
Okay.
Interestingly enough, which I think is absolutely fascinating, and I think this partly has to do with development because Bhutan is still a very up and coming country. They were essentially a rural subsistence culture till about the 1980s. So the
Where are
happiness.
they? Are they in Indonesia or Philippines or?
Nope, nope. They're in continental Asia, over in Central Asia, kind of like over by Nepal, India, over
Okay.
there. Yeah. The happiest countries in the world are the top 10 are all European except Israel, and Costa Rica. So one is Finland, the two is Iceland, which I issue because I've been to Iceland and nobody seemed happy there. Three is Denmark. Four is Costa Rica. Yeah, if I lived in Costa Rica, I would probably feel happier too. Sweden is five, Norway is six, Netherlands is seven, eight is Israel, nine is Luxembourg. Yeah, they're very wealthy, and 10 is Switzerland, also very wealthy. You don't even get out of Europe or the Middle East and over you get the Americas with Costa Rica, but then you get New Zealand at 11, Mexico at 12, Ireland at 13. Well, they're just drunk there. Belgium 14, Australia 15. For the US, we're down quite a bit because we have high inequality and lack a lot of things. Even China's at 85.
What's the
Um,
US at?
the United States, where I think we're towards the bottom. We are currently uh our current is 23. We've been as high as 11, as low as 24, with an average of 17. We climbed the most in 2021 and fell the most in 2023.
Hmm. And
Yeah.
what's the index like based off of? Like by what metrics? Because again, I'm always skeptical of these kinds of indexes and surveys and yada yada because man, these things can go a hundred different ways based on what you're looking at, what you're looking for. It goes also back to what I've been talking about is if you have an intention, previously, or you have an idea about something, man, that's going to skew the observation of that thing.
Yeah,
But
so
yeah,
yeah, so
and
let me
I understand
yeah.
they're probably done as scientifically as with whatever methodology is available, but still,
Yeah.
with limited beings, science just doesn't always cut the mustard. So
Yeah, so so the happiness report is unique because it is extremely scientific. They do a full, on who the authors are, what the competing interests are. You can actually access their raw data. So the World Happiness Report is based on survey data. So
Mhm.
Gallup, the same one who does presidential polls here in the US,
Oh,
actually
those are
goes to
always accurate.
I know, right? Um, they actually go around the world asking people, and the metrics are overall life evaluation, inequality, when inequality, which I think is their own metric based upon average wealth per person versus national income gets into economics. There's support, GDP per capita in terms of how much does one person contribute to GDP, healthy life expectancy, freedom, which is based upon government oppression, how much can you do in society, what legal rights do you have, generosity, perceptions of corruption, i.e., how much do you trust your institutions, positive emotions, negative emotions, if they donated to a cause, volunteered for something, or helped a stranger in the last
Okay.
year. Yeah.
Interesting. And again, and I'm sure you don't know this, but like, what weight do they give to all of this? See, this is where again these things can be, really skewed. I mean, if they give 30% of the weight to their economic status, where I would, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Then that can be really skewed. Where I would tell you that of the all of those things you just mentioned, positive and negative emotions, those would be 90%, and then everything else, gets divvied up amongst the other 10%. That being said, again, that also flies in the face of the things that we've been talking about here, is that happiness isn't just an emotion per se, it's a general state and an outlook and a perspective and a capacity to gauge, deal with, and digest what is happening, and your stance and place within that. So again, I think that's really, really hard to come up with, especially much less codify happiness to a large scale and then ascribe that uh, to a country's status in general. I mean, it's not GDP. It's not something that's measurable in those ways. And again, by what metric, what weight do they give, the various things that they're polling for? Or if they're all equal weight, that doesn't make any sense either. And then who comes up with it? You know what I mean? So
Yeah, so
there's
no,
just
so
a
well, no,
million
while
things.
you've been asking, I've been looking through the statistical appendices to see how they do
Yeah.
this. And so they do standard statistics. So they have a mean, a standard deviation, min, max, and sample size. So it's a very standard. They're not overweighting anything. They're literally doing the surveys of people, keeping that broad, and then they're using standard statistical methods to compute each thing by country.
Yeah, it's a ballpark thing. I mean, it's fun to play with, and it's fun to talk about how much real weight does it hold. I don't know.
No,
Um,
and they actually show how they do like the logarithmic regressions
sure, I'm
to all
sure.
this sort of thing. Like they have there's a lot of that stuff, and also testing how they do the robustness of the data, all this type of thing. And so I don't think any particular thing is being weighted
Sure.
more than others. But like for example, they get into, effects of like mobile phone access and how that affects these numbers, like the donations or the
Sure.
social support, all this type of thing. And so it's an interesting it is an interesting thing. I think I think the weakest part of this data for the World Happiness Report probably is the fact that it relies obviously not on objective measures, because how would you begin to hope to measure that? But it relies on survey data. They go
Yeah.
around and ask people,
Yeah. Yeah.
sort of thing, have you donated it? Do you trust your government? All this sort of thing.
Right. Yeah.
And they talk about in the executive summary, they talk about how, subcategories, not all countries in every year because they couldn't get to that country because of political issues, all this type of thing. And I think a lot of it is self-perceived in
Hmm.
terms of we don't have an external a priori measure of how would we measure that, in any way that is outside of the people involved. Whether people are happy or not, the only way to find that out is to go around asking them.
Yeah, right.
What I
That's what I'm.
what yeah, what I do love about this though is the way they've broken down like here's, you know, here's, the areas that we're polling on and what we think, what they ask people, I think is very interesting in terms of, yeah, did you donate to someone, in the last year? Did
Mhm.
you, do you feel socially supported? I think that's a very
Yeah,
interesting.
that's those are interesting questions for sure. Yeah, like did
Yeah,
you
I think
help
those, yeah,
a
those are very
stranger?
interesting
Did you
questions.
volunteer? Did you? Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, and
those
I
kinds
think,
of things are
yeah.
interesting. And again, it's an interesting. I mean, I like these kinds of things and that this kind of data. I think there's something kind of cool about trying to capture something that's otherwise sort of uncapturable.
Yeah.
Um, but we have to understand that at the same time that there's some degree of futility in it. But I still think
Yeah.
it's a worthwhile endeavor to some degree. But also just to point it out, a lot of the things that they're also polling about are external circumstances.
Yes. And I think, and if you get into some of these countries, it's kind of funny that the United States, by their data, rates lower than Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Czechia, Austria, Slovenia, Germany, Kosovo, and Australia are all above us, and then Belgium, Ireland, and the ones I mentioned before. So, like, technically speaking, if you wanted to increase your happiness, move to Mexico. They're 13 spots higher than us, sort of thing. If you really wanted to increase your happiness by this
Right.
data, Slovenia, like,
Right.
here we
Yeah,
come,
but
sort
no,
of
yeah,
thing.
very few people are crossing the border that way, right?
Right. But yet we're
So there's something to
23rd
be
in
said
world
for
happiness, but we have an immigration problem.
yeah,
Like
well,
that.
but maybe again, the point being is there might be more safety and security here, which is going to be priority number one as a human being. So,
Right, and having known people that have lived in Slovenia, that's the reason why no one's trying to get to Slovenia in a hurry. Sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, it's all of those things all of those things are a factor, but we have to wrap because we're 10 minutes to the hour and we have a hard out today. So before I want to go, I think the final question really would be, after having talked about Bhutan and looked at the World Happiness Index and all this type of thing, how do you think society does or does not contribute to happiness as defined as a state of being by engaging with reality on its own terms?
super, super, super good question, Cam. So I think that society can set the stage, just as we've said. Um, the culture that a society presents to its citizens, uh, and it sort of naturally evolves or devolves in many cases into one that's aligned with wanting to unveil reality to its citizens or not, or to keep them in a constant state of looking anywhere but to what actually is. And so I
Mm,
think, and I think that that really, again, is actually what's underlying and underwriting all of this. Um, so far as what we're talking about in terms of a society trying or people within a society being happy and that culture takes place from so many different. I mean, it's not like I don't think there's the Wizard of Oz sitting, somewhere in Washington D.C. or in the Pentagon or something, directing this cultural narrative. I think that that's something that we all play a part of and contribute to. Via our actions, our thoughts, and the things that we concentrate and participate on and in or with. So a culture just evolves or again devolves into a certain sort of state that is either going to consistently pursue truth or have to pursue a distraction. Um, and again, that distraction could be tied up in trying to simply survive day to day. And And so what's more important for that society and for that culture is, I think a lot of people would say in American society today, we are almost fully concentrated on survival and on the distractions, and not looking, and maybe not having the time and energy. And maybe there is some sort of Wizard of Oz, sitting somewhere, trying to at least steer the current in that way. However, we are all complicit, uh, in the cultural, in the bringing about of the culture. There are people who are, reacting against, certain things at certain times. But at a certain point, there's inertia and momentum that will always carry the day, and reality and truth will eventually, at some point, always come to light. If you doubt this, look at any example from history, and what was being portrayed at that time, and what we now know of that historical event. Um,
No,
it,
I'm very interested to see. I probably won't live long enough to see it, but I would love to see how history will reflect this time.
yeah,
Especially the last 10, 20 years or so. And I even look at my own work because I've been writing on a lot of this stuff since like 2014. And I've watched myself be kind of like, wow, why are you so surprised and unhappy? You literally said this would happen, me.
yeah,
Hey, me, you literally told us this is exactly what would happen, and then it did. Never have I been less excited to be right. Would have loved to have gotten it wrong. Um, but it will be very interesting to see how history reflects on this time. And also, I mean, let's also face it, but right before we go, a lot of our nostalgia for the past is through a very particular lens that tends to blur out the not so great parts about the past.
certainly, certainly.
You
And
know,
you can say that from history or from your personal perspective also, right?
well, I mean,
Yeah,
as I tell people, I said everybody thinks the 50s and 60s were so great. That was only true for certain people. My mother
sure.
did not grow up with indoor plumbing. It was not installed till my mother was 7 years old.
Yeah,
Her
yeah,
mother did not lived her whole childhood and had four children before indoor plumbing was in her house in rural
right.
Colorado. That
Sure.
was in this country, and that was not that long ago. My mom's still alive. So, like, we look at it as like everything was so great. I'm like, Also, cars killed you because they didn't know how to get rid of momentum yet. Like, there was a lot of things about the past that were not that great. And I think people looking back, I'll be very interested to see in my old age how people look back at this time because they'll probably make it sound a lot better than it was, sort of thing. So, but anyway, so this has been fascinating. We've explored happiness as a societal construct, including some dialectical materialism and some consumerism and all this sort of thing. Philosophy professors everywhere applaud us. So, um, well, thank you, Joe, for episode 4. We'll be back on episode 5. Our next session, we're actually going to record 5 and 6 together, and then we'll be done. No more happiness. So, um, but any final thoughts before we wrap it up for today?
Yeah, I think that's that.
All right, very good. Well, I want to remind everyone, remember, we're doing all of this to support our summit, What is Truth? Uh, Refining your discernment in the age of misinformation. I'm gonna get that right one of these days. It's on July 17th and 18th. For more details, head over to summit.suitmedia.net. And like I said, if you still want to go but can't afford, email us. We got you. All right, Joe. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Happily.
That's all for this episode of the Cameron Journal podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Visit us online at CameronJournal.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and I love to talk to my followers and listeners, so please feel free to get us on social media at Cameron Cowan on Twitter, and we'll see you next time on the Cameron Journal podcast.